Welcome to Module 4. We're almost there, actually, at the very end of our time together here. Hopefully you're enjoying the book clubs that are in full swing this week, and I really hope that you are starting to think about your final project. Remember, you can email me drafts, and I am happy to workshop those with you in advance of the final due date, which is fast approaching. This week, our module is looking at how equity education intersects with socioeconomic status. And so to start out, we're going to get some terminology around socioeconomic status, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about the text for this week and introduce some of the main ideas from those. Socioeconomic status is the term that is used to talk about class in the public schools. And by class, I don't mean the classroom that you're sitting in. I'm talking about the idea of economics and social markers of high class, middle class, lower class, working class, all of those kinds of things. It's abbreviated SES, and low SES, so kids who are poor, right? It's measured in terms of free and reduced lunch status. So if you qualify for free and reduced lunch, you are considered low SES by the federal government and by the school districts. Title I schools, remember in the first module, we read the Title I information that the federal government puts out. So we should know this from then, but just as a refresher, to be a Title I school, 40% for elementary, 60% for secondary schools, students will be on free and reduced lunch. And the federal government considers that if you've hit those percentages, your school is a high need school in terms of socioeconomic status. There is also, when we're talking about socioeconomic status, we have to remember that the reason that I actually like the term is because it pulls out the idea that there is a social element to class and that there is an economic element to class. And a lot of times these things get talked about in academia in terms of cultural capital and economic capital. And your readings this week are going to go into that a little bit more. But the social elements of class, we know about this, right? Because people will be like, that's classy, right? Or the person has no class, right? We're talking about the social element of class when we use those terms. So the behavior, customs, dress, way of speaking, and our social connections, right? Our networks. That's our cultural capital. The things that we know about, right? The TV we watch, the media that we've consumed, the illusions that we're going to understand when we get into the classroom. There's a social element to class. Then there's also, of course, the economic element, right? Your income, your family's income, their earning potential, the access to resources, things as simple as housing, food, healthcare, school supplies, after school programs, tutoring services, all in the upward mobility or just economic stability of a child's family. That's the economic capital that they're going to be coming to school with. So I'll be tossing more resources onto the discussion boards this week that help us explain and understand what class is in its social context and also its economic context, and how all of that impacts equitable access to education. One of the concepts that we explore in this unit has to do with deficit ideology. And deficit ideology, I'm not going to define it for you because that's actually part of your discussion board work this week. But there's this idea that kids come to us as damaged goods, right? That they're missing information. And that's sort of the crux of deficit ideology. I'll throw you a little bone there. But this really comes into play when we're talking about socioeconomics. And Ruby Payne, who's one of the big writers around socioeconomic status and education. In fact, she's the most popular professional development on working with kids of low socioeconomic status, and has been for years. I myself have been in multiple professional developments that were using Ruby Payne's literature. And Ruby Payne is coming from very much a deficit ideology perspective. She believes that there is a culture of poverty that is damaging to kids, and that education's goal is to fix them and to help them become more like the people who are in the middle class, because that's the way that they're going to succeed. And there are increasingly other scholars and authors who are writing about asset ideology and writing against that notion, and talking about things like funds of knowledge and home knowledge, and appreciating the cultural capital and the things that the students do come with, and that we need to be figuring out ways to center that knowledge and those experiences in the classroom, as opposed to creating curriculum and activities and representation that only reflects this one um, kind of socioeconomic level, to the detriment of the kids that aren't part of that group. So that's something that we'll explore a little bit more on the discussion boards this week as we're talking about socioeconomic status. Because we know the economic implications of kids who are living in poverty coming to school, coming to underfunded schools, who don't have resources. But we need to talk a little bit more, and that's why the focus this week is on sort of that social element when we're talking about class and the economics of schooling.